And I think that there can be like this sense of like grim inevitability. It's like, okay, yeah, what else you got, right? I mean, of course things are going to happen this way, which can be bad in its own way. But I also see what strikes me, and actually I'd be curious about your take on this, right? As this weird overconfidence still from a lot of people about the election, like that Biden just has it in the bag, that he can't lose, which seems particularly weird to me because I get deja vu, right? I mean, like I remember this from 2016, and in 2016, at least Hillary volunteers could theoretically like go out and knock on doors and talk to people in person.
Is this for, I didn't know if this was directed for me, but yeah, no, I do get frustrated by the overconfidence. I'm reminded, I'm a big sports fan, and there's these analytics like fanboys when they talk about, NFL or stuff like that, right? And they think they can see the whole picture based on numbers as opposed to watching the game. When you can see, okay, this receiver is clearly more talented than this, but the game script doesn't dictate that he's getting the ball or whatever. And that's kind of how I feel about the election in many ways. If you're unable to see the forest through the trees and you're only like a Nate Silver data fanboy and you're going to check out, ooh, around the margins in this Pennsylvania county here, Biden's doing great, but you can't see that he's barely speaking full sentences, that's a problem. And you can't see the full picture of the election without those very real concerns. So I think Biden's in a significantly better position than Hillary Clinton was in many ways. One, the desire for stability is tangible in the country. People are desperate for some sort of strong hand at the top who's going to push the country in the right direction. I mean, I read a study on how many people would trust a vaccine that comes out around Election Day, and it's a majority of Americans that say, I wouldn't take that. And because the whole process has become politicized, and when you're in a crisis like this, people don't want that. So that is huge in Biden's favor, but everything else is disastrous. Biden is unable to talk, and that is like not something that the media ignores and it's just going to go away. It's a huge issue. And when it undercuts his pitch to be the steady leader, when Trump is like, this guy's mentally unfit and he's going to rallies every night and like bringing the house down. So there is some of that dynamic, but I'm not going to lie and say that Biden's in a similar position as Hillary Clinton, because Trump now has to defend his record, and everyone wakes up in the morning, they're in quarantine, they've lost their job, their sister, their aunt died of COVID-19, whatever it may be. People understand that things are bad in the country right now, and Trump has to overcome that. And I think that's a significantly larger hurdle than Biden having to overcome the things I just mentioned.
Is there a virtue to nominating somebody who can't string a sentence together? Eisenhower couldn't, Reagan couldn't, George W. Bush couldn't. Maybe
people see that, but like Bush, people just were like, that guy's stupid, kind of like me, right? Biden, most people are like, that guy's senile.
Yeah,
right. That was Reagan's charm.
Well, Reagan was, but I think that a lot of that was, especially at first, right? My understanding is like that wasn't like right out in the open, right? Like Reagan wasn't.
It was more second term Reagan, from my understanding, of when he already had deregulated and given the economy this massive sugar high that people were like, this is never going to end, until it totally did. That's my guess, but
yeah, right. And Reagan wasn't like, I think maybe it like became a little bit more obvious as the second term went on. I think maybe if like social media had existed, some things that could just sort of fly by the radar, some journalists would kind of mention in their book 2 years later, would maybe have been bigger deals, when Reagan would get confused about his own history as an actor and like think that he was like in Europe in World War II. But
being vague, being senile or being stupid or inarticulate allows voters to hear what they want to hear. If you're predisposed to vote for Biden and he can't string a sentence together, then you do it for him internally. He's like a hot medium. Marshall McLuhan talked about this. So you do the work for him and see in him whatever you want to see, kind of like what we did with Obama. So this may work. Unfortunately, I'm rooting for Biden. This may work for him.
I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, right? I mean, I think I've been clear on that, right? That like, Biden, I don't think we should lie about it, right? Like, I think that Biden politically is what he has always been and will be, right? Like, I think this idea that Biden, like that anything that he says right now, where he sort of vaguely gestures at some sort of quasi Green New Deal or anything like that, right? Like, I don't take any of that very seriously, but right, like, I also don't think that he is going to be crusading to try to do the things that that Trump has already been doing and would continue to do in a second term, like, you know, destroy what's left of public sector unions and destroy much of what's left of the regulatory state, right? Like, I don't think he would do those things, and so I think as a defensive thing, yeah, right. I mean, I you know, I'll suck it up and vote for him, but I don't know. I mean, David, like you said that you think that the vagueness, you know, can work well for him. But what's your feeling about the debates, right? Like is that, you know, because Donald Trump is very good at that, right? I understand, like, he wasn't good in the debates with Hillary. He was okay, right? But, like, you know, Hillary, quote unquote, won, right? You know, whatever that means. But
let me just quickly say then, like, I was at 2 of the debates, and I'm in the media room, right? And people are like visibly gasping whenever Trump, remember when he said, you know, she's like, I'm so grateful that someone like Donald Trump is not in charge of appointing an attorney general or something like that. And he goes, that's because you'd be in jail. Right. And like, to me, that was an unbelievable political moment that still resonates with me to this day. And honestly, with her perception as a criminal, it was a political win. But then the entire pundit class thought she won the debates, where I don't see that. You know, it's all about memorability and one-liners. And he made it a WWE contest, but sorry.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Actually, if you read Matt Taibbi's book, Hate Inc., he's got this extended metaphor in there about Trump and the WWE and how if you look at the way that in wrestling, audiences can start to root for heels, like you can see a lot of what's going on with Trump's appeal.
Right.
But I was going to say, right, that like whatever you think about, you know, he did those debates with Hillary, when he was ripping his way through the rest of the Republican field in 2016, that he was very, very good at, right? Like,
I still love watching it.
Yeah, absolutely, right?
Him ripping on Ted Cruz to his face, it's like the most I've ever liked Trump in my life.
Yeah, him slamming
Jeb,
right? You know, and talking about, you know, his mother, and Jeb's like, my mother is amazing, and, you know, Trump says, oh, yeah, maybe she should be president, right? Like he's like just as like he's very, oh my God, the thing that like the Marco Rubio, you know, the bottle of water.
Yeah.
Like I mean, he is a very, very talented insult comic,
but there's no audience.
That's a good point.
Crowd.
There isn't. So you think that this wouldn't be like that? That the force of Donald Trump's skill as an insult comic coming up against Biden's occasional inability to tell his sister from his wife, right? That's right. A thing that happened a few months ago.
Well, he's appealing to the Alabama vote.
Okay. But you think that the debates will actually be good for Biden?
He did really well against Bernie when there was no audience because of the COVID-19. So I think it's going to be a test to see who looks more presidential because there's no audience. It won't be the freak show. It won't be the wrestling match we're looking for, I hope. And I thought that Biden did a pretty good job against Sarah Palin, just smiling and looking vice presidential. And I thought he did a good job with Ryan. So I think Biden may surprise us. He just has to do well. Doesn't have to do great. And don't forget, you know, I remember watching the Reagan-Carter debate, the first one. I was smoking a lot of dope at the time, but I thought, man, this is hysterical. I can't believe anybody would even consider Ronald Reagan as president. And then the next day, the punditocracy and the people said Reagan won.
Yeah, and I mean, like, look, I mean, there's a question about how much these things ever actually matter. I think maybe sometimes they matter when you're in a situation like Bloomberg was in the Democratic primaries, where it just becomes quickly obvious that you don't have this skill, and you somehow didn't expect to have to defend your record, and he was just kind of eaten alive in that debate, right? And that probably really did hurt him. I mean, I think there's some evidence for that, from Bloomberg volunteers and things like that. But
if I were advising Joe Biden, I would tell him, don't go negative. Don't criticize Trump. You already have your minions doing that. Sell your platform to the American people. Just stand in front of the American people. Everybody's watching, and no matter what he calls you, Sleepy Joe, he brings up the sun. Tell the American people what you have to offer them.
He has to do a lot of that.
And lie to the American people. Lie, Joe. Lie.
Emma?
Well, he certainly has to do a lot more of selling himself. There's a significant amount of anti-Trump sentiment that you can ride, but we saw in 2016 that it's certainly not enough. But the difference between 2016 is the Hillary factor. I mean, she was severely unliked, remains extremely unliked. She was the subject of decades of Republican propaganda against her, much of which was not earned. The left-wing criticisms of Hillary Clinton certainly earned, but a lot of things made up. Books written about her, Dinesh D'Souza documentaries made about her, just constantly putting her as the face of corruption in Washington, and that hurt her so much, especially when Trump called her crooked. So that connected, right? Those two things made sense for people. Biden, people don't feel that way about him. And that's huge. And there's an enormous polling shift in trustworthiness. In 2016, around this time, Trump had like 20 points on Hillary Clinton and who was a more trustworthy candidate, which should have sent off alarm bells for everybody. And now you look at trustworthiness and Trump is around, I think, 20 points less than Biden. Yeah. That's huge. That's a huge metric. And I think one of the pieces of polling data that should be taken seriously. There's a lot that shouldn't be, but.
Right. There's been a shift in American politics. It used to be axiomatic that you couldn't elect a senator with a track record. You always had to nominate for president an outsider like Reagan, like George W. Bush, like Jimmy Carter, like Bill Clinton. These were all outsiders because they didn't have a paper trail.
Even Obama, you can say, was an outsider because
absolutely.
He'd only been in for a couple of years.
Yeah, right. Because you cannot run a Washington insider because they end up saying, "I voted for that bill before I voted against it." Remember the Kerry that every time you try to run a Washington insider or somebody with a track record in Washington, D.C., there's just too much garbage to dig up on them. Bernie would have probably, he was an outsider, but not really.
Well, I mean, he was an outsider in that he wasn't identified with the establishment, and I think that he got a lot of mileage out of that. And I think there is some evidence that he did better with independents for sure, and even persuadable Republicans because of that, right? Plus because his message, obviously resonated.
Trump was the ultimate.
Yeah.
Trump was the ultimate outsider, at least perceived that way.
Yeah, right. Although it's interesting because I remember at the very first debate that Trump was in the Republican primaries, one of his lines that I didn't really hear him repeat much afterwards, but it was like this weirdly honest thing, was like he was talking about how he knew that all the other politicians on the stage were super corrupt because he gave them all money and then they did things for him.
Yeah, that was incredible. I mean, that also bolstered the whole drain the swamp narrative. I'll never forget the first political event I went to. I'm like name dropping all these events I went to, but I don't mean to do that. It's just like these things stick out in my mind. And don't worry, I stay at a Holiday Inn or like a Comfort Inn. TYT does not roll out the red carpet. But the first event I went to ever as an intern was I went to Trump's speech after Bernie Sanders had basically officially conceded at Trump Soho, I believe, in New York. And he just goes in on how Bernie was right. Bernie's an outsider. The DNC completely manhandled him and screwed him over, and it was Hillary Clinton. And a lot of this landed because there was truth to it. Same with the crooked Hillary thing. The best political narratives that are used dishonestly in the way he does begin with a kernel of truth. And Trump's better at that than anybody, but he's not doing that effectively with Biden. One of the stupidest things he's doing is trying to tie Biden to rioting and looting, while at the same time criticizing the crime bill and saying, oh, he's locking up all of these Black and brown people. Which one is it? Is he buddy with the rioters and looters, and is he weak on crime, or did he push through a draconian, terrible crime bill, the reality, and is the candidate that's actually more aligned with your position? That's true, but there's an incoherence and an inconsistency to the way he's going about things, as opposed to like glomming on to the populist outsider rhetoric and talking about money and politics in a very odd way.
Well, there's also a weird reversal there, right? Like, because in 2016...
I missed what you said, Ben, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say there's also like a weird reversal there, because in 2016, like I said, he was going to drain the swamp, and like he was all about like talking about how Hillary Clinton was part of the establishment. The last campaign ad he did before the election was full of like images of Goldman Sachs, and that was his pitch, right? I mean that Hillary was representing the globalists and the people who are keeping down working class Americans, and now it seems like there's still some of that, but like it seems like he's kind of done a 180. That now like instead of attacking Biden the way that he attacked Hillary, as being too cushy with the 1%, he's trying to say that Biden, like, that he's a communist.
Yeah, exactly. And right. Shoot, I totally forget my point.
Well, he's a wrecking ball, and in many ways he can make an argument that he did drain the swamp, because we have lost faith in the entire swamp. It doesn't matter. We know what the truth is, that he's looting the swamp. But if you're a voter and you're angry, he has kept his promise of destroying this. He's destroyed everything. He's destroyed the FBI. He destroyed the Justice Department, the EPA, everything, the CDC. He didn't just drain the swamp. He took a wrecking ball to it. And granted, he's making money off of it. But if you're angry, if you're facing eviction, if you're out of work, if you're without health care and you don't see Joe Biden offering you a solution, F everybody, take a wrecking ball to all of it.
Yeah, it's a great point, because, and it goes back to the point you made about how Biden needs to make his case. Why is he not out every day saying, where are the second stimulus checks? Where are the second $1,200 payments? Where is the eviction moratorium? Where is the, unemployment benefits? Why are we reducing them when people still can't get jobs? I mean, it's the biggest no-brainer ever, but partly that's because would simultaneously expose the weakness and terrible negotiation tactics of Pelosi and Schumer, but it's a no-brainer politically, and that is such a small piece of ground to cede for the overall picture of winning. I
spent 30 years working in Hollywood. Lying is just good manners. It's just good manners to lie to somebody. And the least you can do as a politician is lie to me, make promises that you can't keep. Why is Joe or Amy Klobuchar or Kamala being pragmatic? Why is like, marry me, honey? we'll lose interest romantically eventually, and I'll be a bad father. I'm going to be upfront with you. I'm a bad, and I don't shower every day, and I don't shave. I want to be upfront with you. You're not gonna be happy, but you know what? When we die, we won't owe the credit card company anything. Will you marry me? Which
is an ironic example, because one of Joe Biden's legislative accomplishments was making it harder for people to not owe money to the credit card companies. Right? Like that was that's the bankruptcy bill, right? That was
full circle, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
It's transactional in Washington, except for the voters. They're always asking me for $5, and I write back. They don't answer. Okay, I'm going to give you $5. How much do I get back in return when you're in office? I want $10. Show me how you got me That's how we have to look at it.
All right. Well, on that inspiring note, thank you, David. So I really appreciate it.
I cleaned up for this. That's it. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I could tell you did a great job of cleaning.
Thank
you. That's very impressive.
I know the TV on the floor.
That is the fly in the ointment, right? Otherwise, that is just impeccable.
Perfect is the enemy of good, and never forget that. Thank you.
Yeah. If you're listening to this as a podcast, David Feldman, he has a very well kept room, right? There's a TV on the floor, but otherwise, like there's not a speck of dust to be seen. Very impressive. But you should listen to the David Feldman Show, which is actually twice a week. That's that comes out.
Yeah, it's Tuesdays and Fridays, and it drops at 3 a.m. Each episode is only 8 hours. So
okay, that's good. That's good. So yeah, thank you very much, David. Really appreciate you coming on. Talk to you very, very soon.